everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Reading Party podcast with Megan and Lexi. This episode continues our season looking at modern retellings of the Iliad and the Odyssey, ancient epics known for both brutal violence and instances of sexual assault. This episode is not suitable for under 18s. We hope you have your favourite beverage and snack ready to go, because we've got our teas and are ready to start spilling the tea on our latest ancient story.
So, the movie Helen of Troy, I had so much fun. That was amazing. It's like, it felt like a very slightly higher budget Hercules, Adventures of Hercules, but about the Iliad. It was beautiful and cheesy and wow. What are your immediate thoughts?
Well, okay, whatever. I'll just say, I immediately thought it was a great watch. It was very entertaining. I liked a lot of the production value, especially at the time it was made back in 2003. I mean, goodness me. Also just like comparing it to what we have now, though, I'm like, oh my gosh, leaps and bounds have been made. But also in terms of the narrative, it was to me like a mixture of, Troy, Fall of a City, because it has a lot more like backstory and epilogue to it. But they leave out some really key things. So it was like a mix of Fall of a City and the Brad Pitt Troy. And I did really enjoy the cast, like more than I thought I would. Although some of the times I would like look at the person who is playing said character and I was kind of just like, what? This choice seems out of left field. Like I would say it was funny because when I first saw Rufus Sewell as Agamemnon, I was taken aback only because I imagined him to be older, and Rufus Sewell was like young and attractive, and I was like, excuse me, what is this? And then to have Menelaus be not looking anything like his brother, and
Menelaus is, I'm looking up the actor now because he's intensely familiar to me, and he's amazing, and I love him.
I had a lot of that with some of the people in the cast, though. I was like, I've seen them before. I couldn't tell you what they were in, but like, I've seen them.
No, I can't work out where I know him from, but I know him. I know his face. And he was the most likable Menelaus I have ever come across.
I know, but that's also because I was like, this Menelaus was like... I mean, looking at the characterizations of these characters that we've seen through several adaptations now. Also, I was shocked because my initial thought was, this might be the first Pearson Helen that I haven't absolutely just objectively hated passionately from the moment I saw or heard of them. But they sort of like, I didn't like how they sort of infantilized Helen at the beginning.
The beginning was a little, I started watching it and she's obviously a grown woman.
Yeah, they're like, you're a child.
Because she just is. And they keep saying, you're just a child. I'm like, if that's just a child, good Lord, they are developing early these days. And it was like weirdly, bits of it were weirdly sexually charged in the beginning. Like her and her brother was a little uncomfortable. And then you have Theseus who's like, I mean, where the hell did he come from?
I know, that's when I texted you and I was like, Megan, I was like, oh my God. I was like, there's a random character played by Stellan Skarsgård. And I was like, but he's like some random person that is not in the story. And I don't know why he's here. He adds nothing really to the plot, but it's entertaining as hell because I love him as an actor.
I couldn't work out why he kidnapped Helen at all.
I know, not to marry her.
There was no reason. It was just like, I'm going to steal you now. Ah, ha, 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 ha. And then he cast slots with his buddy, who was, by the way, low-key hilarious. They're like sneaking into Sparta to steal Helen. And this guy with Theseus is saying, this isn't fun. Swimming in shark-infested water is fun. This isn't fun. I'm like, you're easily my favorite minor character, and you never ever appear again. But then they cast lots to see who gets to take Helen home, and I'm like, what was your plan if you didn't win? Exactly. But then he takes her, he's the ruler of Athens, and he takes her to Athens for reasons no one actually knows. And he keeps telling her, no, you're a child, we're just friends. And then you kind of come back. She tries to seduce him, and then she says, but you always said we'd get married. And he's like, oh, we were just rehearsing for your real true love. Like, what the fuck has been going on? Exactly. And how long has she been here? But then her brother appears and just kills Theseus and then is killed. Yeah, what? So then Helen gets taken back to Sparta, and her father is so furious that he essentially just abandons her in the courtyard full of Greek kings. And is like, one of you take her, I don't want this woman. What the hell?
I was like, this is the weirdest beginning to an Iliad retelling, because I was just like, I think the beginning is the most trippy. It's the most trippy because you're like, this is random. Why is this person here? It's I'm sure it's not gone. Also, I was like, okay, Theseus had nothing to do. I was like, what?
Why is Theseus here? Exactly.
Yeah, so when he was like, my name is Theseus and I'm king of Athens, I was like, okay. Wrong timeline. Oh, also, did you get that weird vibe? So like when they're giving the Paris backstory, because it's called Helen of Troy, but it kind of starts with Paris and him looking in the judgment of the goddesses. So you have this very short scene with the goddesses. And then when it's so trippy, when Aphrodite's like, she doesn't tell him explicitly really, but she's like, here, Paris, like floats the golden apple toward him. And it's like, what I will give you is seen within. And then you just get like this weird thing where like her face shimmers into existence on the apple, and then a detail that is not in anywhere else, and I don't know why it was here, but then he sees Helen's face, and then Helen, it like jumps to Helen in looking in like a pool of water, and then sees Paris's face, and then she's like, I have fallen in love. And I'm like, what? And I was like, excuse me? Yeah, so that was like real weird, real trippy. But yeah, the whole like Paris thing was just interesting to say the least. And I mean, it was interesting. I mean, you have Cassandra as a child being like, Daddy, kill him. And he's like, okay, take my child. like throw him off the top of Mount Ida. Bye. So, I mean, it was just quite an entrance. And then when he like comes back, it's similar to Fall of a City where he goes back because he has to get in the fighting ring. But in this one he defeats Hector, which I was like, that would never have happened.
Very shocking. And you've got Cassandra kind of walking around the perimeter of the ring, just staring at him, and then she's behind Priam's throne and she says, kill him! And he's like, this is familiar, what is going on? It's my son! Like, magically recognizes this child he hasn't seen since he was approximately an hour old. I did enjoy what they did with Cassandra, though. She was an excellent character.
Yeah, no, that was really good. No, I was
because she's sane to begin with, and then it's almost like Priam, he believes her, and then he's like, you're getting on my nerves now, and we're not going to listen to you, so I'm just going to casually throw you in a dungeon and leave you there for 10 years to go mad. Parenting at its finest here.
what that's what you do. It's teaching us valuable life lessons. When you have a problem child, you just throw them in a dungeon and don't think about them.
That's what I need to do with my 4-year-old.
Just throw them in a dungeon and be like, I'll see you when you're 14. Bye.
No, you may not have more snacks. To your dungeon.
I mean, well, we have nicer ways. Cinderella, just, no, you may not have that. I'm going to send you up to your tower and lock you in the room. Same deal. But yeah, but then I was kind of like, when he is walking around Troy, I found it really interesting where he's talking about trade missions at one point, and then he was like, oh, this is such a multicultural city. It's the richest in the world. And then he says this weird, trippy bit about, we control the door to the Aegean and the riches and the spices of Byzantium. And I'm like, timeline? does time mean anything? I was like, excuse me. I was like, Byzantium is like 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, and here we are in like 600, like before Christ. I'm just like, I can't even help. Timelines, guys, timelines.
It was just so fun. Completely removed from most actual, facts, because it's an epic poem, but most actual content of the poem. You have the bare bones. I did think Agamemnon was excellent.
Just because I love that actor.
He is just a creepy dude. Yeah, he's a great actor, but he's a creepy dude at the start. He remains creepy. He's like borderline mad because of the Iphigenia sacrifice thing, but he's also a massive misogynist, and you see that right from the get-go.
But he doesn't even like his brother, which is weird too. Like,
no, he doesn't like anyone, I don't think.
No. And it was just really weird and different, because I think if you're like the Troy one makes them appear a bit closer than I think they probably were. The Fall of a City version, I think, struck a better balance, because that was clearly like a, yes, at the end of the day, it's like they're brothers, so they will fight, but also they weren't like this, I'm going to hug you now, and I'm going to, so it was interesting, but this was like a wild departure. But also they were younger than I would expect them to be, because they're described as being like older. So the fact that you have a young Rufus Sewell just being like, yeah, that's me, I'm Agamemnon. He does kind of have that creepy smolder, and it was so interesting because when he looks at, like, when you get and it's interesting because this is the only adaptation where you see Atreus alive. He's like a character, and you're like, oh, we're going there. Okay, we're going there. Atreus is a person, and he's alive, and we see them before Agamemnon is king. Sure. So when you see, and it's interesting because this is the only adaptation I think I've seen where you get to where Agamemnon is engaged, betrothed, whatever you want to call it, to Clytemnestra. So it was.
I liked her, by the way. She was a good Clytemnestra.
Also her character development was great, because you see her like first interactions with Helen, and then you see her last interactions. We'll get to that, but yeah, guys, it was wild. But she was really good. But Agamemnon had this weird thing where, like, he was literally being presented to his bride. He's like, yes, I claim this woman as my bride. For 2 seconds later, for Helen to show up, and then he's like creepily like staring at her.
Creepily leer at my apparently child sister-in-law. And we've emphasized this, but the number of times they say in the first half hour of the movie that Helen is only a child, and you've got all of these men literally just standing there leering at her, and she's kind of half dressed. She's been out gallivanting around the hills by Troy and riding a horse, and her hair's all a mess, and her clothes are kind of like, she looks like she's been pulled through her head backwards, but sexy. And because she's emphasized as a child, having Agamemnon leering at her it's very creepy. It's very creepy.
Yeah, not just him, but like even Theseus and the friend. I mean, the minute after he kidnaps her and she's like struggling and she's like, where are you taking me? What are you doing? And he's like, yes, you have a power, because he's like, oh, also they made her the daughter of Zeus. And I'm like, well, that's a new one. They're like, daughter of Zeus, because you are the daughter of the divine. That is why your beauty is the best in the world, and everyone is going to be weakened by you. And I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Isn't she supposed to be the daughter of Zeus and Ida, though?
I don't remember. I thought she was. No, because they said
that was in Thousand Ships as well.
I thought they said that she was the most beautiful mortal woman in the world from mortal parents.
I don't know.
Oh dear, I need to go actually find.
Because wasn't she
her parentage?
Didn't Zeus seduce her as a swan? Seduce Leda as a swan.
Oh, he might. See, that's the thing. Zeus seduces so many people.
So, to be fair, he seduces so many people that.
Yeah, because I'm just like, I can't remember, because he seduces so many people. Well, either way, in all the other adaptations, it's never explicitly said, like, your beauty is the result of you being the daughter of Zeus. So that was, to emphasize that was completely new. But yeah, you have this weird, I keep coming back to it, but the weird like Theseus thing, which I don't know why that was there, but it was entertaining.
It's just so bizarre.
It was entertaining.
I was glad it was there just for, entertainment value, but it was so bizarre.
Yeah. But like even him, like when he first captures her, he's like leering at her as a child and is like, your beauty is amazing. And then he does this whole thing where he like gets super close to her. And then he's like,
are you going to kiss this
And then she
child?
says that like, but it was disturbing because she had that like disturbing rape line where she was like, are you going to rape me? And then he's kind of like laughing and he's like, I don't rape children, which I'm like, great. But also like, why is this line in here?
Also good, but.
Yeah, I was like, why is this in here? But so he luckily does not rape her, but he just like takes her back. Yeah, it was so weird. But also, yeah, to meet your captor and then have your captor immediately be like, we're gonna be married one day, so just sit tight, and then reject her when she's like finally like, wait, I want you, but
I'm old enough now.
Yeah, so then that's weird, but
I'm actively seducing you, and I'm not allowed to because I have to marry someone else.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, that's weird. But then, okay, skipping a bit forward to when Paris is discovered and he's fighting Hector, I was just, my initial thoughts were, good God, how can this man be fighting when he clearly has like broken ribs and a bunch of broken other things and he's like still fighting and winning?
All right, against Hector.
Yeah. And wins? And wins.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that was also the fact that they made Paris the bigger man, physically taller, and I thought he was like broader shouldered. I think I found the guy who played Hector like smaller.
He was, I think, generally a bigger person.
Which I was like, but isn't Paris supposed to be the wafy, like little weakling? So this was very interesting to see. How did you feel about the actor who played Hector generally?
I enjoyed him, actually. I think he did a good job of he got the general fury of, you are going to destroy us all and I am absolutely powerless to stop it. But then you kind of see their relationship grow and develop. And obviously there's a massive 10-year gap because you get like the first day of fighting and then you have Menelaus doing the voiceover saying, and then we were there for 10 years. And then at the end, on the first day of fighting, Hector saves Paris's life, and that's kind of the turning point for them. And then on like the final days, they've clearly become very close. And I think they did that very well. Yeah,
the time jump was a bit jarring just because they put so much into random prologue stuff, the Theseus storyline, which the Theseus storyline took up like the first like 30 minutes.
It was a good 40 minutes.
Yeah, 40 minutes. And I was like, okay. And then when they finally have, also, it's funny because you hear of all the kings of Greece were competing for Helen's hand. And in this one, their competition was putting rings in like a jar, throwing them up and being like, well, whichever ring lands closest to the jar, you just win her. And Menelaus just happens to do that.
I did. So it was completely not what is written. But I enjoyed that because of the whole Theseus, like, subplot kidnapping thing. Her father is, because her brother dies in the attempt to rescue her. Her father is so upset and angry about having lost his only son that he turns her out into this courtyard. The kings are all there for the funeral. And he says, like, literally, someone take her. I don't want her anymore. So she's not... And the kings have this whole discussion about how she will bring doom and destruction to whoever she marries, but they all want her anyway. So it's not this like competition of honor. She's not this high status. I mean, she's beautiful, but she's disgrace as well. So they're like, it's not worth going to much trouble over. Let's not fight. Let's just do this random game of chance. And before we do that, by the way, let's all agree. And that I felt was quite cleverly done by Agamemnon to give like a reason one day for him to be in command of the whole of Greece, because it's come up a couple of times that he wants to rule the entire Aegean. So they agree beforehand, as they do in Greek mythology, that whoever doesn't win Helen will come to the aid of her husband should she ever be stolen, which is very convenient. And then they do this game of chance, and Menelaus is like, yes, I win, and takes her. And then randomly, when Paris is in Sparta, which is framed as an excuse, like Paris thinks he's there essentially to get killed by Menelaus so that his family don't have to kill him, so Troy can still stand. And Menelaus does strongly consider it, but then Helen and Paris escape beforehand. But you get to Sparta, and Clytemnestra and Helen are bathing, and Clytemnestra's like, don't let him do this to you. When father punished you, you always fought back. Why aren't you fighting back? And Helen's like, there's no point. And you're just sitting there thinking, what on earth is going on? I don't understand. I am very lost. And then she gets out of the bath, totally naked, and just walks into the feasting hall, turns around and stands on this plinth. And it's never explained. It's used by Paris as an example for why the Greeks don't respect women and why Helen is so much better off in Troy. And, I agree. She seems very unhappy. I would be much happier in Troy. But she just is standing there naked, and the men stare at her and then kind of go about their business. And then later, when she's in the bedroom with Menelaus, he says, you did well. The kings were impressed. I'm like, what was the point of this? Why were you parading your wife naked through the halls? What? Most random scene. And then in this movie, most random scene is actually saying a lot. But definitely most random scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, I was kind of speechless. Because I was like, okay, well, maybe they'll explain it. Maybe she will explain. No, just walks naked. And then you're like, okay. Well, and then as she's standing on this, like, stage, essentially showing off her nakedness to all these leery men, you see Paris coming in and like suddenly makes eye contact, and she makes eye contact, and it's this really weird thing where she's like, oh, and then it's like slow motion, and then it's all like movie whatever effect, and then you're like, okay, yeah, it was like movie magic at its finest. So that was like just trippy. And then she's like talking to Paris kind of, and then she's like randomly kissing him on the ramparts, and then you have a random Clytemnestra like sees this and is like, what are you doing? The whole thing in Sparta, I was just,
and she says, I've loved him my whole life.
Yeah, and I was like,
you saw his reflection in a pool.
You didn't know his
Let's
name.
Not get confused.
You didn't know anything about him. You just saw a random photo in a pool and then declared your love. I was very confused for most of that. Everything in Sparta.
It was confusing and beautiful.
Yes. I don't know. Everything in Sparta was a bit confusing. So then we fast forward to, and then I remember, so when she was leaving, she initially tells Paris, no, I'm not coming with you.
She's breaking him out of Sparta so that Menelaus doesn't kill him. And then, I'm not coming.
And then says, no, I won't leave with you. And then he's like, okay, I guess. And then like gets on his ship, starts to leave. And then she just suddenly...
She swims in.
She just like...
jumps in the water and is like, no, wait.
Yeah. And then she's like, well, now we're fucked. But okay, cool. Great. Wow, we're going home. And I was like, okay.
There was this nice little scene with them on the beach, though. They're like halfway to Sparta, to Troy. And they're like swimming in the sea. And she says, why don't we just stay here? And he says, I'd make a better shepherd than a prince. I'm like, no doubt, friend, no doubt. But we have to take the men home. And then they see the ships of the Greeks, which is fascinating because there has been a 2-month delay between the Greeks getting together and then leaving because of the wind. So how they caught up quite that fast, I don't know. But it was a nice kind of plot device to push Helen and Paris home when they were strongly considering not going.
Yeah, so that was weird. They did include the sacrifice of Iphigenia again in this adaptation. And the girl who played Iphigenia was younger in this version than even Fall of a City.
Yeah, she was an actual kid. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. Well, so of course, Agamemnon is creepy and horrible, but he tried to be a good father because there were several scenes of him like swinging his daughter around, emphasizing how like he was trying to be a good father. And then, so it was shot much differently, but yeah, basically. Also, I was like, Clytemnestra was playing with her, and then someone just like grabs a child and brings
Soldier
her
just
and
randomly steals her.
And Clytemnestra's just not there. So I was like, okay. But yeah, so I was like, oh, please don't show anything, which I'm glad they didn't because she was so young.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because they couldn't give this little girl agency the way that they gave the older one. So, but that was...
And it was a beautiful, horrible touch when she's walking up to the altar. She's got a guard on either side and they're both holding a hand, and she's doing that thing my kids do where they jump and kind of hang on a
and they go, wee! Like up and down, wee!
She's a baby!
Yeah, so...
But no, it was... I was glad they didn't actually show...
Yeah.
Really an awful lot of blood or gore at all, considering the other adaptations we've watched. It was a surprisingly blood-free movie, which I appreciated. Troy Fall of a City was excellent, but I was a little bit
very gory. Very gory.
Yeah, I was kind of done with blood by the time I finished that. So watching this was a nice change of pace. I've also found out why I recognized the actor playing Menelaus.
Yes, why?
He's in a bunch of stuff. He's in he's the psychologist in Star Trek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's Bashir, isn't he?
Yes.
I think he's Dr. Bashir. He's also in Battlestar Galactica and in Bridget Jones. He's her gay best friend.
No, it's Bridget Jones' Diary that I'm most connected. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So this is all of this explains why I was very familiar with him and really struggling to work out why he looked bizarre in Greek armor. Because he's in Star Trek. He's supposed to be in Star Trek uniform. Right, so we did Iphigenia.
Yeah, so then they get the wind, and then they sail to Troy. And then you do get...
Magically making up 2 months in a matter of hours.
Yeah. And then you do still get the parlay scene that they included in Fall of a City, where Menelaus and just Odysseus go and essentially say, return Helen. And then you have this great scene where they're like...
Priam's like,
for what?
Why?
And he's like...
What do you mean, why? She's my wife, sir. But then Priam's like, so is she chattel? Is it... Like, what? Do you own her? What's going on? And Menelaus is essentially like, yes, I own her, give her back. Or we will burn your sissy. And Odysseus is like, Menelaus, shut your pie hole, please. And Odysseus is like, it's a matter of love. And any man whose wife was taken by another man, whether willingly or not, would act with passion because it's love. And Priam says, you have spoken wisely. We will give you our answer by dawn. And then no answer comes. It's just like, fuck you all.
Yeah. Well, and then you have this whole scene where like when Paris and Helen are there, Helen's just like led in this great, beautiful garment. And then she just announces to everyone, I would like to go home. Thank you.
Send me back.
And then they're like, what?
Yep. I don't think so.
Yeah. And then Paris is like, oh no, what? Yeah. It was like very random. Yeah. So then they get there, they fight, they have the first day of battle. And then we skip 10 years.
What did you think of that first battle scene?
It was...
Or really all of the battle scenes.
It was interesting because it's different than I assumed. Also, the armies look smaller, but I understand for budget reasons. But to have like the Greeks like disguise themselves and sneak kind of into not the upper city, but they were somewhere, I guess, maybe up against.
They were in the lower city.
So then they just like rip off these disguises and they're like, we're here, and then they fight. And
at one point, Paris and Hector actually swing from some tapestries hanging on the wall, and it was giving me Robin Hood, King of Thieves vibes.
Yes.
Honestly, that whole battle was just...
Yes.
It was really camp. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah. There were so many like cringy moments though in this.
Achilles! What did you think of Achilles?
Okay, Achilles is strangely bald, and his armor, which we have really detailed descriptions of, are like strips of leather that will not protect you in battle. And also, it's so wrong because the entire movie was him being like, I am Agamemnon's man. And I'm like, no, you weren't. The whole source material is how much you hated that pig. And he stole your shit. And then there was no Briseis.
No 10-year-old.
Yeah. And there was no Briseis. There was not even Patroclus. There's no Patroclus.
Mm-mm.
And I was like,
It was just Achilles being like big and actually terrifying. And
he was just like a brute. He's a brute.
if he was playing D&D, he'd be a barbarian.
Yes, exactly. Yes. No, I wholeheartedly agree with that. It was just the strangest thing, honestly. It defied expectations, any expectations really. And yeah, there was no Patroclus, no Briseis. The fact that he was like Achilles, he was Agamemnon's man was strange. His armor was not. Also, I was like, okay, but in what world is the duel between Menelaus and Paris longer and deserving of more screen time than the duel between Hector and Achilles, which was, I mean, that was just weird. I mean, you think you know what's happening. You're like, okay, it's fine. Like, I know what's happening. They're gonna duel, and then because I was confused because like Menelaus like throws the first spear, it draws a bit of blood, and then suddenly Paris is like getting a bit slow and a bit weak, and he just looks like he's about to pass out from like dehydration, and you're like, dude, come on, get it together. Please tell me you're not gonna like actually be dehydrated.
And you find out he's been poisoned.
But not enough to kill him.
Menelaus cheated too. He poisoned the spear.
The mist?
No, just enough to really slow him down, and then somehow they end up
They're in the mist.
a stable. Like, they fight through Troy. Yeah. Bizarre mist. And Menelaus is like, the gods must favor you. Yeah. And Paris says, I could have told you that. Like, oh dear. But then they're best friends. It was beautiful.
But what you get is this, like, bro scene. Yeah, I was like, you get this weird bro scene where you're like, okay, these two men should hate each other. And then instead of, like, when it looks like Menelaus is about to win, I was expecting, okay, Aphrodite or some sort of goddess thing is going to happen, and Paris is going to be whisked away, and his life will be saved. No, he was, like, about to be killed, and then suddenly Menelaus, like, grows a conscience, and then helps Paris up, and then they sit down together, and then they have this like little chats between them where he's like, oh, you're not like your brother, it dawned on me, oh, and in another life we would be best friends, I think. And then there's that,
and I'm so sorry for the way I treated Helen. I feel like a really shitty dude for that. Does she ever talk about me?
No, dude, no, she doesn't.
It was amazing. I loved that scene. I absolutely loved it. It's completely anachronistic, and it was wonderful.
I know. I loved it because I was just like, what am I watching? But it was fantastic. And my favorite part was like where where I think it was Paris was like, so if your brother doesn't care about Helen, why are we trying to kill each other? And he's like, oh, good point. I don't know. And then he's like, okay, can you walk? He's like, yeah, I can walk. He's like, okay, bye. So he like walks out of the mist where apparently no one followed them or could see them. Then they're like, okay, he won the duel, ha ha ha. And then you see all the Trojans suddenly be like, I'm so sad. Oh my God, he's dead. And then he just like stumbles out of the mist. And then Hector's like, oh, my brother, you are alive, but you can't fight because you're poisoned. And then he's like, I will take your place. And then challenges like Menelaus first, I think, to finish it. Or no, he challenges Agamemnon, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna fight to like finish the war. And he's like, ha ha ha, sure. And then you get this 2 seconds of pleading from Priam and Hecuba where they're like, no, don't throw your life away. And then you're like, oh my God, wait, so are they going to fight? Are they going to do this? Because like this Agamemnon is not afraid to do anything, so I feel like he would do it. And then you suddenly have Achilles be like, I speak for Agamemnon, so I will fight instead. Come at me. And you're like, excuse me, that's not how the duel went at all. And then he's like, does this little bit of trickery where he's like, okay, you get the first shot. And then literally turns around. So his back is facing. And then you see poor Hector, he's like, conflicted. And then he's like, he might do it, he might not. And then he's like, no, I can't. And then he just kind of like puts his spear down. It's like, I don't fight that way. And then to have Achilles not even be like, okay, I'm going to fight you. He just like whips around and he's like, well, I do. And then like throws his spear and Hector just dies without a struggle. I'm like, excuse me, that's not the Hector I know.
It was straight up murder.
Yeah.
And then he still does the whole tying him to the chariot and driving around the city. And then there's a scene later in the Greek camp, and he's still just driving Hector's body in a circle around the campfire going, ah! And it's at that point I realized, you're just a dick. Like, there is no grieving for your lost cousin, lover, boy, best friend, whatever. You're not grieving. You're just being a dick.
Yeah, I mean,
you can.
There was no reason. Without Patroclus, you strip out all reason or understanding for why on earth he would want to humiliate Hector so much. I mean, you already killed him with like zero fight. Just leave him there. But no, you still drag him around. And then he just, for the rest of that night, he's just like driving around and around in the Greek camp going, ah, ah. And they're all like, Achilles. And
everyone is cheering like, Achilles, Achilles.
And you're like, what did he do?
Are you all not tired?
I think I didn't like that there was no character development and that I was a little critical because I'm just like, look, this is a very main character. We have a lot of textual stuff. And they stripped him of like any kind of personality. He's just a brute. But they don't even emphasize that he's like the best of the Greeks. He has the best skill. There's just, he's a big, tall puppet. So I didn't like how, like the other adaptations we've seen, at least they've made a deal about how he's the son of a goddess and how he's like powerful and he's the most skilled and talented and it makes sense. And for this just to not have any sort of, I was just like, what?
Yeah. It was, the whole, a lot of the other adaptations, at least part of the plot has been driven around Achilles and Briseis and Chryseis and Agamemnon and Patroclus and the whole thing, as it should, because that's how so much of the Iliad is powered, is by that plot line. So removing it completely was both a very interesting choice, but left some kind of gaping holes in, like you said, character development and why are they there for 10 years? And because surely Achilles didn't need to sulk for 10 years because he didn't have Briseis taken from him, or I mean maybe he did and we just didn't see it. He's just been out killing people the whole 10 years.
But like he didn't sulk at all. So I was like, what? Okay. So yeah, I was very confused when you leave such massive things out. But then
you put Theseus kidnapping Helen in because that is somehow more important. I loved everything about this, even the confusing what the hell bits. It was so fun. And I do want to talk about Helen because I feel she's obviously the titular character and she needs some discussion. We go from like willful, headstrong, disobedient child to willful, headstrong, disobedient adult. And I think this is the only adaptation where I have liked her, unequivocally liked her. Even Troy Fall of a City, where she's sympathetic, she's not terribly likable. And in this one, I'm just, okay, you're fun and you are genuinely doing your best. And like she tries to go back and the Priam convinces her, no, we'll protect you, you'll be fine. And then she tries to go back again. And then Agamemnon's like, no truce, no trade. We're just going to destroy the city, which from the characterization of Agamemnon we've seen he was going to do all along anyway. But she has a personality. She has, like in Fall of a City, she has motive for leaving Menelaus and for going with Paris. But this was more, because I feel like because she didn't have Hermione, and because you see Menelaus abusing her, I don't know what else we can call the random naked parade. It's abuse because you see that, and I get the feeling they weren't actually married for terribly long by the time Paris appears. It's not like she has this life that she has just decided. Well, I mean, again, Fall of a City, she didn't just decide she didn't like it. The feeling is she never liked it, and this is her one opportunity. But in this, she didn't even have a life. There's no relationship with her husband. There's no daughter, and she's very, very young. She can go, essentially. I really, really liked her, and I was not expecting to. And the opening scenes irritated me. Yeah, exactly. The opening scenes irritated me because of the whole child thing. I think when you get an adult woman to act like a petulant 10-year-old, it is jarring no matter how well she does it. But then kind of once they got past that bit, and after she's a grown-up and kind of trying to influence her world in a way that the only way she can, I really enjoyed her.
I was a bit shocked by how much I didn't hate her. And I mean, hand in hand with her herself being given more of a personality and a weird, inaccurate backstory, but a backstory nonetheless. Like it made it easier to see her for the decision she made. And
like the backstory, it makes her a full person. In all of the other adaptations, you don't meet her until Paris does. And then she's just kind of this thing that he wants. And in this one, while her seeing him in the pool was, again, completely anachronistic, it serves as a corollary to Paris seeing her in the apple, and it's more of they're both working towards this end goal rather than he's just going to get this woman that he's been promised. They've been promised to each other, and this is what they both want. And because you see that, she doesn't seem as fickle, as capricious, as like uncaring as some of the other Helens do.
Yeah, I don't know. I just this was also shocking to me because it's the first adaptation where I haven't just immediately poo-pooed and hated their romance. Because, normally, for all the reasons we've said, I mean, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, gross. Whether she ran away or was stolen, it's just kind of grody. And it's so funny because, like, the Brad Pitt Troy tries so hard to make this seem like a star-crossed lovers thing, and it's like they need each other so badly because I just wanted to walk into the sea and disappear every day. I was with Menelaus, and oh, woe is me. And then you're like, okay, puke, and then and then this one, I didn't actually hate the romance, and it was like the first time that I didn't mind it because I was kind of like, they managed to actually make it a bit sweet. Yeah.
And Paris has a spine.
Yes.
Which helps.
Yes.
And again, Fall of the City, Paris is well done. I think he's a decent character. But the others, especially the Troy movie, I mean, you're not supposed to like him in that. He's just, the less said about that, the better. But in this one, he has a spine. He's a little bit arrogant at times, which I found a very interesting choice. And I was kind of rooting for them, which I never do, ever.
I know.
Just doesn't happen.
I know. I was thinking like, wow, the power of storytelling, because they're actually making me semi-care about the romance. What? Mm-hmm. So that was shocking. But yeah, no. It was much better done than other things. So they kind of elicited the desired response, I suppose, from me.
Yeah, I think they did. Oh, we should, before we finish, talk about Clytemnestra as well.
Yes. Yeah. Oh well. Hey, there's still the whole end part, which is as you're getting.
Oh God, yes.
Because as you're getting toward the end, after Helen tries to ask Cassandra what she can do to spare Paris's life, and she's like, "Well, you have to go surrender to Agamemnon," and she's like, "Okay." So she like sneaks down to the camp, tries to trade herself He says no. And then what you have is this random ass scene where as soon as he like rejects her, she like runs away. He's chasing her through this camp, and it's madness because Achilles is just in his chariot, like riding in circles around a bonfire. And then what you have is like suddenly Paris is there, like takes off the disguise and then shoots Achilles in the heel, and he's suddenly dead.
And he's dead.
And you're like, okay. And then he like finds Helen only to literally be stabbed aggressively.
Right, then Agamemnon
later.
just appears from nowhere and like stabs him several times.
And then he's like, oh, well, you gave me happiness. Bye. And you're like, oh God, okay. What's gonna happen? And then it just like kind of, and then Helen ends up being rescued, even though she's in the middle of the Greek camp, but then she ends up back in Troy where they like...
No one also seems to mourn Paris.
Yeah, no one mourns Paris.
Or indeed
her.
Hector. I mean, there's a little bit of sadness over Hector, but like, Paris is literally never mentioned again. He just was murdered and no one cares.
No, don't you get that one shot? There's that one frame, though, I think, of a funeral pyre where she's crying.
Oh no, you're right. There is. Sorry, I apologize.
So but it's not very long, and there's no dialogue. No. But you see a burning pyre, you see her crying, and then the very next scene is the Trojan horse.
Cut to the Greeks leaving.
Yeah, and then the Trojan horse, and then they shoot it with arrows. And
oh wait, sorry. Before we do that, she goes back to see Cassandra, and says, "I gave," or does that come afterwards? Either way, she says, "I gave myself up to Agamemnon and he still died. What the hell?" And Cassandra looks at her and said, "You didn't surrender, did you?" I was like, ooh. Poignant, poetic. I like it.
So then you're like, oh shit. And she was like, yeah, okay, well, you're right, I didn't, but okay. But yeah, so then you have like the short celebrations, and then within like 10 minutes movie time tops, the Greeks break out. They come into the city. They start burning and pillaging.
They took great delight in the pillaging process.
They did, but
there
then
were several shots of gleeful Greeks just carrying gold away. I'm like, okay, okay.
And I was like, And I was like, yeah, because all this gold would be in the lower city where the poor people are.
Absolutely, it's where I keep my gold.
But okay, so yeah, and then you have this like very short scene of Priam is there with like a stricken Hecuba who's just kind of like lying on a bed.
I feel like she kind of has maybe lost touch with reality a little bit following the death of Hector, because she's lying on the bed saying, I can hear the children playing. Are they well? And Priam's like, they're very well. You've given me beautiful children. When they grow up, they will make you so proud. And then he turns around and Greeks in your bedroom. Don't you just hate it when that happens?
Yeah, and then he's surrounded, and then he's like, spare my wife. And then Agamemnon's like, I'm not playing. And then he just stabs him and then leaves. And
I am taking far too much glee out of this, I feel.
But it was just like, so much of it was so just like random and sudden that you have to be kind of gleeful because you're like, okay. So that happens. And I think, honestly, for me, the most shocking thing of the entire, like, 2.5, almost 3 hour. They call it a miniseries, but on YouTube it's like put into one, so it's basically like a long movie. Was he finds like so the deal when going to Troy was that he would take the city and his brother would have his wife back. But I was not prepared, and there was no warning, so I was really like, oh my god. So definitely spoiler
warning.
It does need a trigger warning because so they bring Helen to him. Menelaus is like strangely just like around kind of across the courtyard. And then she's just like looking at Agamemnon like, you're horrible. And then he's like, see, this is what happened. And then proceeds to violently rape her, which
while looking at his brother.
With a really evil face. And for Menelaus
it was horrible.
And he starts charging, and then you see the most emotion out of him in like the entire thing, where he's like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, yeah, this is not. I was like, So
I was expecting some kind of something between Helen and Agamemnon, just because how they've had him looking at her throughout the whole
but not
movie.
that, right?
No, I was like, maybe he gropes her and Menelaus appears and smacks him across the face and takes his wife back. Not expecting sudden and brutal rape.
Violent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that like Menelaus was absolutely powerless to defend his wife.
Yeah, and the Agamemnon's guards are just like holding him back. Interesting.
Like, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was shocked
and then
by that.
Clytemnestra is in Troy.
Yeah, and then she's suddenly in Troy, and you're like, why
just
is she
appears.
in Troy?
How did you get here? Like,
and she sees,
but
she sees Helen, sitting like half naked in like a torn.
Yeah, we've kind of cut to a bathroom, like a big Roman.
Well, it was the same bath where Helen was taking that bath with Paris. So it's like the baths of Troy.
Right, yeah.
So he's like celebrating. But he's randomly in this bath, and you see Helen, poor thing, like sitting on the edge, naked and beat up. And then Clytemnestra comes, and she's all like big sisterly, and she's like, "I will cover you. Like, go. I want to protect you." And then you just have Agamemnon being like, "What did I tell you, Clytemnestra, to not meddle in my affairs of state? You may bear my children, but anything else you're useless for." And then she's just like...
Right, because at the beginning, sorry, because this ties directly back to an earlier scene, when Agamemnon and Helen are leaving Sparta, when Paris is there and Helen's like on the ramparts, like essentially saying goodbye to her sister as they go back to Mycenae. You have Agamemnon doing his creepy staring thing, and Clytemnestra has seen him do it a couple of times before, and like the camera has like made it very clear that she's seen him staring at her sister, and she walks up to him and says, "No man can have everything that they possess." And Agamemnon calls the priest over and says, "My wife thinks that no man can rule the world." And I'm like, that's not what she said, actually. And priest is like, "Oh no, the gods decree you'll rule the whole Aegean." I mean, that's still not the world, but okay, fair enough. And then the priest goes, and Agamemnon says to Clytemnestra, essentially, "You will bear my children, stay the fuck out of everything else." And then they leave. So then this scene, she does the same. She's trying to protect her sister. And he says, "I told you before, stay the hell out of my business." And then...
she like unveils this large net and throws it over him in the bath, and then just like runs and jumps onto him with her knife, and then you just get this like graphic scene of her like sitting on top of him, just like
this
stabby
is like the only graphically violent, because even the rape scene, you see the faces, but that's kind of it. This is the only graphically violent scene, I think, in the whole series.
Because she's just stabbing and stabbing and stabbing, and then he drowns in the bathtub, and you're like, oh, okay. And then she leaves, and you're like... Also, I did enjoy the sword. They emphasized like she gets up and then like has the sword in her hands and then just drops it. And I was like, hey, that's like a mic drop before a mic drop. So I didn't want to call it a mic drop because it's not a mic, but I was like, sword drop. So, yeah, that was pretty epic and graphic. And then she just leaves. And then it cuts to, like, Helen going back to the exact spot where Paris died. And then she has this, like, dream sequence where she's like, I miss you. Take me to where you are. And he's... yeah. Yeah, he just, like, appears. And he's like, I love you, but no, I can't do anything. Bye. And you're like, that was unnecessary. And then suddenly Menelaus finally finds her.
Finally finds his wife.
And then
this whole movie is one man's absolute failure to find his wife in a city.
Yeah, and then she's like, "Oh my god, he's gonna kill me." So then she just like takes her hair and is like ready, and she's like, "Okay, he's gonna behead me or whatever." And then he's like, "Why would you think I would do that?" He was very confused.
He was, yeah.
And then she gives this whole, I cannot love you even after.
He's like,
and he was, okay. Yeah, he was strange. Just like, okay, what are you going to do now? And then, shockingly enough, she was like, follow. I will follow you.
Just follow, yeah.
And he's like, I accept. And you're like, excuse me? And so, like, you literally just have, like, him walking off with her just, like, randomly walking behind him willingly. Which was so different compared
Menelaus
to, like,
at the end
everything.
of this series is a real sweetheart.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I like you. Like, when did you get all like respectful and just kind
touchy feely and women's rights?
Yeah. Also, he didn't seem to. There was no "my brother is dead." No. Also, well, he should have sailed home. So I was like, okay, that's weird. Yeah, I was very. Yeah, I just like speechless, just kind of like, what did I just watch? What? Okay. Yeah. Well, also because I was comparing and contrasting it with Fall of City, where you get the very emotional Helen, who yes, she betrayed the Trojans, and then she goes back with the Greeks, but then she has this pointed thing where she was where that Helen tells her Menelaus, you can have my body in your bed, but it will just be an empty shell. My heart stays here.
He's like, okay, the body was the only bit I was interested in.
Yeah, so he's like, I didn't care about your personality, so this is win, 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 win for me. So the
Why
fact
couldn't we have done this to begin with?
Right. So the fact that like that version of Helen was like an unwilling participant to go back with him as his booty, essentially. To this one where she was like, no, I will willingly follow you because I have nothing. Very different endings for our Helen. Like this one, I actually kind of felt, I didn't feel like worse for her, but I just felt like differently for her. Because it was like her choice at the end where she wasn't, because she wasn't being taken as a captive where her fate would have been worse than death. This was just like, I am choosing to go, which leaves you with a very different feeling than with poor other Helen being like, well, my body will be used and abused and I'm unwilling and I hate everything. Bye. Like, different,
And you feel the different Menelaus characterizations, I feel like this Menelaus will probably just leave her be.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of like, hey, as long
they'll
as
live together, hopefully they'll be friends, maybe, but
yeah, like I felt like
I don't feel there's sexual abuse in her future, is what I'm getting at.
No, not at all. No, because this one very much struck me as like, especially when they were like coming to that sort of deal between them. I feel like he was like, look, as long as you agree to do your duty, we'll just be friendly, and I won't harass you about trying to make you love me because I know it's not going to happen. Like this one took rejection surprisingly well.
He was very grown up about it. I was impressed.
Yeah, I was, because all the others, he definitely is not taking rejection very well. He's like, I am king. You must love me, or at least do your duty. Something. Yeah, I don't know. How did you feel about the end of this one?
I felt it was very fitting for the characters they'd shown us. Honestly, the whole thing was delightful, barring the rape scene. It was just delightful. It was fun. It was very well acted. It was cheesy as all hell. And I think that's probably why I enjoyed it so much, as opposed to something like the Troy movie, which is trying to take itself entirely too seriously. And this kind of, making a movie out, or even a miniseries out of an epic poem is difficult. You've got gods to deal with. You've got people doing bizarre things. And the Fall of a City did it very well, playing it as straight as they did. And they really kind of lent into the tragedy aspect of it.
But then you get dark and gritty.
Right. And dark and gritty works, but it's also depressing as all hell. This, I think, trod a nice line between the tragedy of the war and what happened and just a fun movie. Like, with epic stories. I feel like they did what Troy the movie was aiming for and missed because they were being too serious with it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because now looking at the three different theatrical sort of adaptations, and the books, but it is interesting because I definitely would say, I didn't have fun per se watching the other two. Fall of the City, dark, gritty, depressing. It works well. It leans into it. If you want to go for the tragic aspect, it's great for Fall of the City. The Brad Pitt. I mean, I suppose I will say that's an entertaining watch where you will be entertained. And it'll hold your attention, but I don't have fun watching it. Unless, I'm trying to make fun of it as I analyze the shit out of it. But I guess I'm very just entertained. This one, I was laughing. I was kind of like repeatedly like, what the fucking every 2 seconds. I was like, why is this random person here? But I love it. I would say I was gleeful for most of it. Which is something you don't normally get.
It's kind of a lot of the violence was kind of cartoon violence.
Like slapstick
even
almost.
Though it was real people. Yeah.
Which you don't
Again,
expect from
barring
something
the-
like this. Like slapstick.
No,
That's
absolutely not.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And I did like one of the problems I have with the Iliad as a whole is that you don't get Agamemnon's end. And obviously that's a deliberate choice because the story ends at Troy. It's a story about Troy. Fine. And if you know classics, you know what happens to Agamemnon anyway. But I think one of the problems with adaptations that leave him alive at the end, there's this unresolved conflict for viewers who are not familiar with his whole story arc. Because he's awful. He's just unremittingly awful. Except in War Goddess, but we've talked about how that's just a completely different character. He's awful. You don't want him alive at the end. Having him alive at the end feels just wrong. And I think even though it's changed, it's not as it is written, I think having Clytemnestra in Troy, whether she teleported or just sailed for a really long time, who knows, having her there, having her defending her sister and having her avenge her daughter, and having Agamemnon as dead as he really should be, given what he's done through the course of the movie, it was much more satisfying for me, a much more satisfying end to the series, I think, than if he'd sailed home.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I do like because it's so long and it's expanded, you do get the prologue helped, I think. It was fun and weird and just like so trippy and random, but it really helps build up full characters.
But it was great.
Yeah, it helps build up full characters. Again, I don't think I'll ever be on board with the repeatedly calling a clear woman a child, but sure. I mean, if anything, that just makes you laugh your ass off when you see a clearly
so surreal,
like full-grown woman who's probably like 35 calling her like a
and
child.
she's so sexualized through that half-hour opening.
Yes, because everything.
If she's a child, then portray her as one. Don't have her dressed up, like showing a ridiculous amount of leg, especially in the banquet scene.
Yes,
like Clytemnestra's wedding banquet. She's just reclining on the couch with her dress hiked up almost past her thigh.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Absolutely no question there. But if you're calling her a child, if you want the audience to believe she is a child, and if you want the audience to believe that the rest of the cast believes she's a child, then, like, dress her like one.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that was the thing that bothered me the most. But it was hilarious.
Yeah, no.
And fantastic at the same time as bothering me. So, I'm not even mad about it.
I know. Isn't that the great part? No, well, I don't know. Yes, that they had some interesting choices. The interesting choices were made, especially wardrobe. But, I had a ton of fun. And like most of the adaptations we've seen, I found it to be personally enjoyable because it's also like I know they try to sex up the characters in certain ways or the romance and the this that, and the other thing, but it's a completely bisexual smorgasbord of like yum, which I love because every time I watch this I'm like, please sex everyone up. I am so here for it. Just not if you call them a child, but but if they're not called children and you're going for the like everyone needs to be sexy, then I'm like, I want every single person here because they are beautiful.
Yeah, they were. They were, with the exception of Achilles, because he
this one was
freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah, this one was just like. But this one he really did fit the description of big dumb brute. Like
he did, and I feel like that was probably the brief he was given. I think this was the character that he was given, and I think he played it really, really well.
He did. If that
I
was
personally
what
did
he
not
was given.
like it very much.
No, because he's supposed to be more philosophical. Like,
but he was hilarious.
Yeah, yes, he was entertaining, and if this is what they gave him, then like bless him for doing so well. But I do like my Achilles more like in the style of the David Ghiazzi Fall of a City version, as like the philosophical dude who was like, I'm not gonna just do stupid random things. There has to be a reason. Yeah, but you know, props
this
to
Achilles,
you,
it feels like you could just wind him up and point him in the direction of the thing you want destroying and let him go. And there doesn't need to be a reason. Just tell me where.
He's like I'll have a party for no apparent reason once I've killed someone. Again, the whole I am going to kill Hector for no apparent reason, cheat, and then just take my chariot around a bonfire going, wah, wah.
That was so funny.
I was like, this is just so weird.
I shouldn't laugh, a man is dead, but also, what are you doing?
I know, right? Well, and then there was no scene of like Priam coming to beg for Hector because, well, Achilles is already dead. I was like, I just don't understand. Like, they gloss over so many things.
There's no Andromache.
There is no Andromache. Like,
she's just completely absent. Hector is a single man. Single and ready to mingle.
I just don't understand how you can include such vital characters that others leave out, but then for other vital characters, I'm like, how did the decision get
just
made?
Skip them entirely.
I'm like, who decided that?
I don't know if they were trying to minimize the trauma and the tragedy. I don't know if they thought, okay, wife and child is a step too far in terms of the tragic scale, so we're just going to ignore them.
I mean, maybe, but also, I don't know. I'm just like, why would you have the Iphigenia stuff and not have Briseis or at least Patroclus?
Yeah.
Like to me,
yes,
that's random. Yeah. Like I'm one of those, like, either you have both or you have neither, because to have one without the other is weird.
And the thing is, because of how Agamemnon was played in this, he's set up as a warmonger and a conqueror. You don't need the added goad of having lost his daughter to make Troy worth his while. It's already worth his while.
I just had it. The overarching thought I had about that entire thing was that I found it quite strange that they thought it necessary to include a minor thing in the end, which is you need to sacrifice your daughter for wind. But so you get that rationalization for why they can sail to Troy, but then when you have something as big as why is Achilles angry? Why is he doing this? To not have anything. So I'm like, so you'll include I need a bit of wind and not you killed my lover.
Right, but not the whole reason. Yeah.
So that was a strange choice. So if I want to go for something that's a bit more accurate for the original source material, I probably wouldn't choose this. But if I want a raging good ass time where I'm gonna laugh my ass off gleefully, then I will watch this. Also, I wanted to point out that did you bother to read any of the comments?
I read the first one where someone was saying this was their absolute favorite adaptation. I'm like, you know what? I can really see why. But I didn't read the rest of them. Yeah. YouTube comments are a trip. What did you find?
Oh my God, they are. There was one, I don't remember how far down, but it was like saying that like they loved this adaptation because this was still a better love story than Twilight. And I was like, wait, actually though, like normally,
not wrong.
I was like,
Absolutely
normally they're both bad because I don't like Twilight's romance and I don't like this one, and I like this one like very horribly, like not at all. But for this particular portrayal, I was like, yeah. Also though, the fact that there was this one person who said that that they loved this portrayal of Paris and said that that Paris and Helen had been his favorite couple in mythology since he was 8 years old. I was like,
you've not been reading enough mythology, friend, if Paris and Helen are your favorite.
Yeah, that's why I was just like,
I will introduce you to some alternatives, I think.
Yeah, so I was kind of just like, okay. So yeah, no, I found it really funny because I always, if it's on YouTube, sometimes I'll just check to see what people are thinking about a certain adaptation. And so I went down like a rabbit hole, and I thought it was so funny because half of these are just like mind-bogglingly funny. And yeah. I think definitely overall is that this was one of our favorite entertaining, gleeful productions of it. I definitely want to rewatch it.
If you're looking for historical accuracy, don't go for this one. But
no.
Like you said, watch it and have fun.
Although it might be, with the exception of the rape scene, I think it also is one of the better ones to show your children because it's not as gory as any of the others. I mean, even the Brad Pitt Troy. Which is far less gory than Fall of a City. It was still gory, so if you just fast forward or skip the rape scene and maybe the Clytemnestra killing stabby scene, I don't know. You're a mother. Would you show this to your 13-year-olds?
I would. My 15-year-old would be fine. I would not show it too much. Well, the 4-year-old would also be absolutely fine because he wouldn't really understand an awful lot of what was going on. Probably would skip the 9-year-old.
Okay. I mean, yes.
No, my 15-year-old would be fine with it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on, for each parent how. Maybe it's a kid by kid.
Your
basis.
mileage may vary. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a kid by kid basis. And also how much you're willing to expose your children as a parent. Because let me tell you, my movie experience, my mom was like she must be sheltered and she cannot watch anything that's in the wrong rating until she's that age. And then my dad proceeded to show me Lord of the Rings at 10 years old when it's PG-13 and it's violent as hell. And my mom was pissed that I saw something so gory. But I loved it, and I was not. She thought I was gonna be scared and like traumatized, and I was like, "No, this is the best thing ever." And then I was like, "Yeah," and I was like the only kid in my age group that had seen all three of those and all like the Matrix films by the time I was like 11 or 12, and everyone else's parents were like, "You're letting her do what now?" And my dad's like, "Oh no, she's very mature.
You're not allowed to play at that house anymore."
Yeah, and my dad was like, "No, she's very mature." So. We loved it. We totally recommend watching it. I don't know, drop us a line. Let us know.
It's on YouTube, so go watch it for free.
Yeah, and then
comment.
And then email us.
Tell us what you think.
Yeah, email us. Tell us what you think because we want to hear what you guys think. Obviously, what we think. We're reviewing it, but we want to know what you think. So, yeah. Well, I think that's. Unless you have any final thoughts.
No,
that's us.
We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week, guys. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review, and you can also follow us on social media at The Reading Party Podcast. If you'd like to leave us a book or movie suggestion, then email us at thereadingpartypod@gmail.com. See you next week.